संसारदावा नललीढलोका त्राणाय कारुण्या घन घना त्वम् प्राप्तस्य कल्याणगुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् महाप्रभु कीर्तन नृत्य गीता वादित्रमाध्यन् मनसुरसेना रोमाञ्चकाम्पश्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधननित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमर्जनादो युक्तश्च भक्तांश्च नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसाद स्वादन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घान् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना प्रतिक्षणा स्वाधनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् निकुञ्जयूनो रतिकेलिसीदे यायलिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षात् अतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव शब्दी किन्तु प्रभुर्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायन्स्तु वंस्तस्य यशस्त्रिसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् 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 पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिसतारिणे कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Shri Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya Sudarshana. Jaya Sita Ram, Sita Ram, Sita Ram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Pragladalada-dayine. Hiranyakashipurvakshaha. Shilantankarnakalaye. Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha. Yato yato yamitato Narsimha. Bahir Narsimha Hirdaye Narsimha. Narasimha Madim Saranam Prapate. Tavakara Kamala Bare Nakam Abhuta Singham Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavatita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Kamalavare Nakam Abhuta Shimam Lalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Narasimha Dev Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki jai, Prahlad Maharaj ki jai.
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो यही अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो यही अभिलाषी ये तुम्हारे शरण लोय तारा वंश पूर्ण होय कृपा कोरी करो तारे वृंदावन वासी मोरा ये अभिलाष बिलास कुंज दियो वास नयने हेरिबो सदा जुगल रूप रासी यही निवेदन धरो साखीर अनुगत करो सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दासे कोई ये न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा येन बासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा येन बासी यानि कानि च पापानि प्रमाद्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्माद्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Vrinde Devi, Jaya Vrinde Devi, Vrinde Devi, Jaya Vrinde Devi. Nitya Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur Hari Bol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. वृंदे देवी तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय. वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवश्च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः. वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवश्च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः. वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवश्च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यव्रताय नमो नमः.
Oh, Tulasi, beloved of Krishna, I bow down before your feet. My desire is in the service of Shishirata and Krishna. For everything shall come with his wish fulfilled. Bestow mercy upon him
Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Pandeham Sri Guru Shri Jataha Pachakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sadanatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Visakha Nritamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shiva Savanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Bhasidanta Dvatanhamne Namo Gora Kishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambhade Pradamba Jayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchitananda Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Savabhoma Sri Jagannathayate Namaha Vanshakalpa Durabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurutuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Vataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Kanta Namostate Jaitam Suratur Prangur Mama Mandamater Gati Matsarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadumada Shrimad Ratnagata Simhasanastito Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastadi Vihi Sevyamanu Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasa Rambhi Vamsevata Tatastita Kasan Venuswanir Gopir Gopinatak Sriyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hiri Priya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahmasamiti Ki Jai Ishwara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhe Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Pragata Sadma Sakalpa Vriksha Laksha Vrite Susura Vibhaliantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamana Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Vajami Behinam Kvananda Madhavinda Dalaitaksham Bharhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandharpa Koti Kamaniya Visesa Sobha Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Vajami Alola Chandrika Salasarvarmal Yuvam Sri Ratram Gadam Pranaya Keli Kalavilasa Shaman Jivangala Lita Prakasa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Viddimanti Pasyanti Panti Karyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaita Varchuta Manadi Mananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastukoti Vatsatavat Sampagam Yova Yoradapi Manasomri Pungamana Sobhyasti Yat Prabhadasimya Vichinti Tatve Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitum Jagadanda Kotim Yas Chakti Rasta Jagadanda Chaya Yadanta Adanta Rasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nikamai Bhagatatai Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rapya Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nikamai Bhagatatai Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasavati bhavitabis tabirya eva nijarupataya kalabi goloka eva nivasata kilatma bhutto govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami pramanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santak sadeva hidayasa vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menitis Nanavataram Akarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumam Yog Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, and head decked with peacock feather, and the figure of a beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute, and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Sham Sundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees and maintains and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas, by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever-blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Sham Sundara Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion, tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world, in the forms of Rama, Nishinga, and Vamana, etc., as his subjective portion, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavat Dharma Ki Jai. Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Granth Raj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we have a quick summary of where we are in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita. We first discussed, the first thing that's discussed in this chapter are the main themes that are discussed. So number one is Prakritim, the material nature. Number two is Purusham, the enjoyer, who the jiva is the false enjoyer, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the real enjoyer. Then Chetram, the field of activity, which is the body. And then Chetragyam, the knower of the field, one who knows the body. And there are two knowers, the jiva and the supersoul. Then Jnanam, which is knowledge, which is understanding the difference between the body and the soul, and then understanding the difference between the individual soul and the supersoul. And then understanding that Krishna is the source of the supersoul, the individual soul, and the material nature. That's called Jnanam. And then Gyayam, the object of knowledge, know Krishna as the source of material nature and the body. Okay. And in the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the knower of the body, the jiva, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. The middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the relationship between the individual soul and the super soul in regard to devotional service are described. And then the last 6 chapters, let's see what that is. For some reason or other, I didn't write it down. The last 6 chapters is about the last chapter is how to develop love and devotion for Lord Krishna. Okay, so then after that, we studied the 5 levels of consciousness, or 5 levels of understanding the absolute truth. And they are, first 3 are materialistic understanding of God, and that is Anamoya, Pranamoya, and Jnanamoya. Anamoya means understanding God as food, just like a baby, a newborn baby, immediately is searching for food, and when it finds the mother's breast, it becomes satisfied, and for him that is like God. And then Pranamoya, after understanding Ana, or food, as God, now he understands living entities and life forms. So his mother is a living entity, and his father is a living entity, and uncles and aunties and so forth. That's called pranamoya, life symptoms. And then number 3 is jnanam, beginning to understand that he has a mind, intelligence, and ego. So that is called jnanam. So those 3 are material realizations of the truth. And then next comes vijnana. Vijnana means now he begins to understand that there's a difference between the gross body, the subtle body, and the soul. And there are 2 major souls, the jiva and the super soul. So he begins to understand that, but it's not completely clear yet. But as he advances, it becomes clearer. And then the last stage is called Anandamaya, where he develops his or her relationship with the super soul, and then understands that Krishna is the source of the super soul, the jiva, the material nature, and everything. Then he develops transcendental bliss in serving and engaging in devotional service to the super soul, and he participates in Krishna's eternal pastimes. So that is the highest level of consciousness, called Anandamaya. All right, so then after that, we also learned that there's 3 conceptions of the Brahman realization, that is, the Brahman realization as the light and heat energy emanating from the body of Krishna, which is impersonal, or at least it seems impersonal. It's actually not impersonal, but it seems impersonal because It's made up of infinite number of spirit sparks or infinitesimal souls, which all you see is light, but actually the light is being emanated from these individual souls. So it's not actually impersonal, but it looks like it's impersonal. And then the next is Brahman is the super soul present in the heart of every living entity and every atom of the universe. And then the third level of Brahman realization is understanding Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's and Brahman can also refer to the entire material creation, according to the context. Okay, so then after that we learned what are the 24 elements of the material body, and they are the 5 great elements, or the Mahabhutas: earth, water, fire, air, ether, and earth, water, fire, earth, water, fire, and air, sky, and ether. Okay, so that's 5, and then after that, there are 5 senses: earth, water, fire, air, ether. Yeah, 5 senses. There's eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and then the objects of the senses: seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, and seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling. Okay, and then there are the 5 working senses, which are the arms and legs, or hands and legs, and the speech, and then there's the anus and the genital. So now we're at 20 elements, and then there's the subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then there is the pradhana, or the unseen stage of material nature, and then that becomes manifest as the Mahatattva, the seen stage of material nature. Difference is, in the pradhana, the time factor is not working yet, and thus pushing everything to happen. And but when the time factor begins to act, then things begin to move and interact, and then there is it's called Mahatattva, where the material nature becomes manifest. Okay, so those are the 24 material elements of the body. Now there are also what you would call interactions, which is love, hate, and or desire and hatred, and also there's happiness and distress, and then there are the life symptoms, which are consciousness and conviction, and then after that there is the gross representation of the false ego, which are the 5 great elements. In turn, that represents the primeval stage of the false ego, which is technically called tamasa buddhi, or intelligence in ignorance. And that's what the Mayavadis and the scientists and philosophers are practicing: intelligence in ignorance. They're very intelligent, but all they're doing is progressing in ignorance because of speculation and their hatred of Krishna. And then after that is, so that's called the tamasa buddhi, intelligence in ignorance, and that represents the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. And the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature is called the pradhana. Okay, and then after that we studied the 20 points of what is real knowledge as opposed to junk knowledge that's being taught to our kids in schools and to people also. So then we come to supplementary points. And the first supplementary points after the 20 principles of real knowledge are, Krishna said, I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, that lies beyond the cause and effect of the material world. Well, that is talking about the jiva. And then next, it begins to talk about the supersoul, where everywhere has hands and legs, his eyes, heads, and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the supersoul exists, pervading everything. Well, that's because supersoul is present in the body of every living entity. The living entity, the jiva, only is conscious of its one body, but Krishna is conscious of all bodies. So therefore, all the legs, arms, eyes, etc., he can use those appendages of the living entities to know things. So therefore, he's the complete knower of everything. And then it begins to speak almost uniquely, or uniquely about the supersoul, where it says the supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached. Although he is the maintainer of all living beings, he transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of nature. So, the unmanifest state of material nature, the pradhana, means that the time factor and the modes of material nature are not acting. But when the time factor begins to act, then the modes of material nature begin to act, then those modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are supernatural forces that control the activities of all the living entities, you and me. And the time factor is the supreme, well, it manifests things, but then things begin to deteriorate, and finally everything is annihilated by the time factor. Okay, so then we come to verse 18, which says, he's the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. Now this becomes very, very, let's say, profound philosophy. It's talking about the supersoul that is completely transcendental, although he's situated within the material body of the living entities, or in the material world. So this is where it becomes hard for materialistic people who eat meat and engage in illicit sex to understand Krishna consciousness. So, what is this talking about? So it says, he is the source of all light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. So this sounds like it's repeating itself. And it says he is situated in everyone's heart. So the supersoul is present in the heart of every living entity. That means he's in the material world. But he is not subject to the laws of material nature. He's not subject to the three modes of material nature. He's not subject to time. So this is where it gets hard for people to understand because of their conditioning by the modes of material nature, by their limitation by time, and by their material desires for sinful activities. But devotees can understand it. Now there's a difference between the idea of an object and the object itself. So what is that difference? So when it says he is the object of knowledge and he's the goal of knowledge, so it sounds like, well, that sounds like the same thing, the object of knowledge, the goal of knowledge, but it's not. This is getting into fine points of philosophy. So the object of knowledge involves the consciousness of the distinction between the idea of an object and the object that warrants the idea. a distinction without which there would be no knowledge, and which carries in its train all the perplexing questions about knowledge. So, what does this mean exactly? Well, when you're conscious of a distinction means a difference between the idea of an object and the object that warrants the idea. Like, for example, let's say there's this table, right, on which my harmonium is resting right now. Now, what do I mean by a table? Well, it's something on which you can put something else, or you can, or like a harmonium, or you could put some prasadam in plates on top of it, or you could lay down on it and use it as a bed. So here we see that there's the consciousness of the distinction between the idea of an object and the object that warrants the idea. So this could be a table, it could be a bed, it could be a support of something. So that it has many different, let's say, uses. So there's a distinction between the idea of an object. Well, the idea is that it's a table. I use it to write on, or to rest my computer on it, and then use my computer. Right? Or I could sleep on it, or I could sit on it like a chair. So it has all these different possibilities. So therefore, there's a consciousness of a distinction between the idea of an object. What is it? A chair? Is it a table? Is it a bed? You see, there's different ways that you could consider this table, right? So there's a distinction between the idea of an object, meaning table, and the object that warrants the idea. So is it a table? Is it a bed? Is it a chair? You see, so there is a difference between the object and the goal. That's why it says here, he is knowledge, he is the object of knowledge, and he's the goal of knowledge. And he's situated in everyone's heart. So he is the object. Okay, so object means Krishna. First of all, you have to understand, Krishna is everything. So he can be the object and the goal at the same time, because he possesses all qualities. He is the reservoir of all qualities and all. So therefore, he's the object. So he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay. And at the same time, he is the goal. The goal is Anandamoya, participating in his transcendental pastimes, which are full of bliss. So he's the object, and he's the goal. Right? Whereas you could distinguish, like in a material thing like this table, you could distinguish between it being an object called a table, or it could be something that merits, or as it says, that warrants the idea. So, when you put something on the table, then it's a supporting thing. But you could also consider it a bed. You could also consider it to be used for, let's say, holding something up, and so forth. So, but in the case of Krishna, he is the object and he is the goal. So, whereas you might not be able to make that distinction as far as the table goes, but you can definitely understand that in Krishna's case. Okay. Now, these concepts of object and idea, this is part of Greek ancient philosophy, but they were impersonalists, the Greeks. The only one that wasn't impersonalist amongst the Greeks was Pythagoras. All the rest of the Greek philosophers, including Socrates and Plato and many others, they were all impersonalists. So for them, there's the object and there's the goal. But for the devotees, the object and the goal is always Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the source of everything. Okay, so now we're not going to get stuck on that one verse. That's 13th chapter, 18th verse, which we've already studied. This is part of our going over what we've already studied. And then next it says, text 19, thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. Okay, now this is Krishna speaking about himself, right? And he's speaking to us. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains, the Lord has described in summary the body. Okay, we discussed that. Knowledge, all right, we discussed that. And the knowable. Okay, now we're going to see what it means by knowledge and knowable. The knowledge is of three things: the knower, the knowable, and the process of knowing. Combined, these are called vijnana, or the science of knowledge. So, three things. The knower. The knower, there's two knowers. There's the jiva and the supersoul. The knowable, that is the body, and then the jiva, and then the supersoul. And the process of knowing, those are the 20 points of knowledge. Combined, these are called vijnana, or the science of knowledge. So vijnana means you understand the material nature of 24 elements. You understand the process of knowledge. You understand the different levels of Brahman realization. And then you understand the difference between the jiva and the paramatma. And then you understand that Krishna himself is the source of paramatma, of the jiva, of the material nature. And he is the supreme object and goal of knowledge. Okay? So that is vijnana, or the science of knowledge. And then you become a pure devotee and you engage in the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, and you're always in transcendental ecstasy. That is the Anandamaya stage. That is the real goal and the real objective of knowledge, when you attain the bliss, constant bliss, constantly increasing bliss in the association of Krishna. So it says, perfect knowledge can be understood by the unalloyed devotees of the Lord directly. Others are unable to understand. Why? Because they are attached to the body, and that duality between the body and the soul is confusing to them. And when they hear about Krishna, they project their conception of a material body, because they have a material body. They can project on Krishna, and they say, well, he's like us. He has a material body also. And he's like us. He's dancing with women. We also dance with women, and so forth. So they have a complete misunderstanding of who Krishna is. Right? So perfect knowledge can be understood by the unalloyed devotees. Unalloyed means devotees who do not take vacations, who are always engaged in Krishna's service. Even if they go on a parikrama, you'd say, oh, well, it looks like a vacation. It's not actually a vacation. They went on parikrama to holy places, and they're always in association with devotees. So it says, perfect knowledge can be understood by the unalloyed devotees of the Lord directly. Others are unable to understand. The monist says that at the ultimate stage, these three items become one. That's the nonsense Mayavadis. Oh, well, the jiva becomes Paramatma, and becomes God, and God is not a person, blah, blah, blah. All nonsense concepts, all wrong, all ignorance, and they think they know something. They don't know anything. Right? And they're actually very, very offensive to Krishna. Just like if I'd say, well, Vijayasagar, he doesn't have any eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. What? He doesn't have any of those things? Well, that's an insult. Of course he has those things. So the Mayavadis say, well, at a certain point, the Supreme Absolute Truth does not have a body. That means it doesn't have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. And it doesn't have legs, and it doesn't have arms, and blah, blah, blah. So it's completely aparad, it's completely insulting God, that type of philosophy. The monists say that at the ultimate stage, these three items, what are they? That is the three things, knowledge, the knower, and the knowable, and the process of knowing. So they reject all three. So the monists say that at the ultimate stage, these three items become one, but the devotees do not accept this. Knowledge and development of knowledge means understanding oneself in Krishna consciousness. We are being led by material consciousness, but as soon as we transfer all consciousness to Krishna's activities and realize that Krishna is everything, then we attain real knowledge. In other words, knowledge is nothing but the preliminary stage of understanding devotional service perfectly. In the 15th chapter, this will be very clearly explained. So the 15th chapter is another very important chapter. They're all important. All 18 chapters are important. But if you want to really understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, the 13th chapter and the 15th chapter are very philosophical. And you can see right now how much philosophy is in the 13th chapter. And it gets even more elaborate in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Now, to summarize, one may understand that verses 6 to 7, what are verses 6 to 7? They're explaining, one, the 24 elements of material nature. They're explaining the 24 elements of material nature, beginning from Mahabhutani and continuing through Chaitanya Dhriti. Analyze the material elements and certain manifestations of the symptoms of life. So we went over that already a few minutes ago. Then these combine to form the body, or the field of activities. So the field of activities is body. This body. You want to go to India. Well, you have to transfer the body from Seattle to India. So the trip is in the body. You don't leave your body in Seattle and some other aspect of you goes to India. The body is the field of activities, right? That's what it means. So these combine to form the body or the field of activity. And verses 8 through 12 from Amanitvam through Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam describe the process of knowledge for understanding both types of knowers of the field of activities, the jiva and the paramatma, namely the soul and the supersoul. Then verses 13 through 18, that's where we're on verse 19 now, right? 13 to 18, beginning from Anadi Matpuram and continuing through Hridi Sarvasya Vistitam, describe the soul and the supersoul, or the Supreme Lord. Thus, three items have been described: the field of activity, meaning the body, the process of understanding, the 20 points of knowledge, and both the soul and the supersoul. It is especially described here that only the unalloyed devotees of the Lord can understand these three items clearly. Why? Because the Mayavadis crash the three points into one and make a hodgepodge soup, right? Or chutney, or not even chutney, a hodgepodge khichdi, right? You say. So only the devotees can understand these items clearly. So for these devotees, Bhagavad Gita is fully useful. It is they who can attain the supreme goal, the nature of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. In other words, you can participate in Krishna's transcendental pastimes. You don't lose your individuality. Krishna never loses his individuality. And now you're engaged in Krishna's eternal, ecstatic pastimes. In other words, only devotees and not others can understand Bhagavad Gita and derive the desired result, pure love for Krishna. Right? Okay, so that was verse 19. That was like a summary. And now, verse 20. Pakritim purusam chaiva vidhi anadi ubhav api. Vikarams cha gunams chaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavam. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. So both the material nature is eternal, because it's the inferior spiritual energy of Krishna. It's still spiritual, it's still eternal. But it goes through two stages, avyakta and vyakta, unseen and seen, okay, or manifest and unmanifest. So material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of nature are products of material nature. So, the transformations, like for example, what's a transformation? You have a tree, a lemon tree, right? And it has roots, it has a trunk, it has branches, it has leaves, it has flowers, and it has fruits. The fruit is the transformation of the energy in the tree. You see, the fruit, the trees, the twigs, the branches, and so forth. So, it says the transformations and the modes of matter, that is, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are products of material nature. Okay. Material nature means the 24 elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, etc. Right? The soul is never transformed. The soul is always untouched. It's not subject to these transformations. Right? But matter can transform. Right? So in the purport, it says, and see, we're going really slow here because there's a lot of philosophy, and now it's starting a new section from this from the 20th verse on. And we just did the summary of the verses up to the end of verse 18. So 19 was the summary. Now we're starting a new, let's say, more elaborate subject. Right? So in the purport it says, by the knowledge given in this chapter, one can understand the body, the field of activities, right? The body is the field of activities. And the knowers of the body, both the individual soul and the supersoul. The body is the field of activity and is composed of material nature. The individual soul that is embodied and enjoying the activities of the body is the Purusha, or the living entity. He is one knower, and the other knower is the supersoul. Now, when it says that the jiva is the Purusha, or the living entity who is what? Enjoying. Actually, he's the false enjoyer. The real enjoyer is Krishna. But when the living entity pretends to be the enjoyer, then he gets caught by the laws of material nature. But when he understands that Krishna is the real enjoyer and he dovetails all his activities to serve Krishna, at that time, he does enjoy also, but not as a false enjoyer. He is participating in Krishna's transcendental pastimes. So there's a difference between being a false enjoyer, where you ignore Krishna and you usurp or you steal what belongs to Krishna, and you're using it selfishly, and engaging in Krishna's transcendental pastimes through devotional service and offering everything to Krishna. At that point, you're also enjoying, but now this is pure transcendental joy in the company of Krishna. So there's a difference between selfish enjoyment and this pure transcendental service to Krishna, which is full of bliss, but it's spiritual bliss. So it says the individual soul that is embodied and enjoying the activities of the body is the Purusha, or the living entity. He is one knower, and the other is the supreme supersoul. Of course, it is to be understood that both the supersoul and the individual entity are different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entity is in the category of his energy, and the supersoul is in the category of his personal expansion. So the jiva never becomes Paramatma, as the Mayavadis claim. Right? But the jiva comes from Krishna. Paramatma comes from Krishna. But they're never going to be equal or one. But they can be coexistent. That means they're both existing in their individuality, and they're both engaged in Krishna's service. But the Paramatma is a transcendental expansion of the Lord, and the Jiva is also an expansion of the Lord, but he is subordinate to Paramatma and to Krishna. Both material nature and the living entity are eternal. That is to say that they existed before the creation. The material manifestation is from the energy. See, now the Christians don't accept that the soul existed before its birth in the body. You see, here's where you see a lot of differences. If you look in morality, there's almost no difference between Christianity and Krishna consciousness. But if you look into the subject of the soul and its relationship to Krishna or God, and who is and all those type of questions, there's huge differences between the two. But if you look into morality, there's no difference, hardly any difference between Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Krishna consciousness. But as soon as you talk about the soul and super soul or God, there's huge differences. Both material nature and living entity are eternal. That is to say that they existed before the creation. So the Christians would say, no, only Jesus existed before creation. Everybody else, they come into existence when they enter the body or when they're born. So that's a huge difference between Christianity and Krishna consciousness. The material manifestation is from the energy of the Supreme Lord, and so also are the living entities. But the living entities are of the superior energy. So, you, me, we're superior to the material nature, but we get trapped by the false ego to be subordinate to the material nature, which is an artificial position. And in that position, we suffer unnecessarily. Both the living entities and the material nature existed before this cosmos was manifested. Material nature was absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahavishnu, and when it was required, it was manifested by the agency of Mahatattva. Mahatattva is the pradhana, the unmanifest state of matter, but when the modes of material nature and the time factor act, then it becomes Mahatattva, and it becomes visible, and it becomes active. Similarly, the living entities are also in him, meaning Krishna, and because they are conditioned, they are averse to serving the Supreme Lord. Thus, they are not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky. But with the coming forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. That is the mystery of this material creation. See, now the the Christians rejected this mystery, and they said, "There's only one life. That's it. Either you make it or you don't make it." See, that's a crazy concept. See, it's completely bogus, and it creates a lot of problems in Christianity. You know, it definitely it makes Christianity look as if it's very mean, because people are going to be damned forever because they didn't accept Jesus. There's nothing like that in Krishna consciousness. You always have a chance to go back to Godhead. As long as we remain attached to material sense gratification, we suffer in the material world. But if you give it up, even if you're the worst sinner for many, many lifetimes, but if you give it up and become a devotee, you can go back to Godhead. That's not in Christianity. See? And that's why people turn away from Christianity, because when they think about it deeply, they see it's not actually kind, it's actually mean.
How do Christians explain the differences in the birth? How does Christianity explain why some people are born differently, like either
Different
rich,
religions,
poor?
other religions?
No, just in Christianity, or maybe other religions, but specifically in Christianity, because if they take only one birth as the example, why this? At least for us, the karma explains the reason why some people are born different capabilities than somebody else. But how do they explain? Is it just random?
They can't explain it. That's the whole point. And when intelligent people say, this is nonsense. How can they, why is it some people are born, blind, and somebody else is born, completely okay? That means that God must be mean. So they can't understand why that's happening. They reject karma. They reject the eternality of the soul. So then if someone is born blind, that means God did that. That means he's not actually a nice guy. He's mean. Why should somebody be born blind? They can't explain it, right? They just say, well, you just have to accept it. No, why should we accept it? Maybe there's something wrong with your philosophy. Now, if we want to go into it deeply, we could say a lot of things about mistakes in Christianity, and Judaism and Islam, because they're all the same religion, basically. There are little differences, but it's the basic same Abrahamic religions, right? Okay, so it says that is the mystery of the material creation. What's the mystery? That is, but with the coming of forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. That is the mystery of the material creation. And the Christians, Jews, and Muslims don't understand that mystery. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Lord. But due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. It really doesn't matter how these living entities or the superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. In the scriptures, the Lord says that those attracted by this material nature are undergoing a hard struggle for existence. That's true. Everyone's struggling. You have bodily problems, you have social problems, you have problems due to weather, you have problems due to diseases, you have problems due to economic downturns, you have so many problems you have to deal with all the time, right? So that means that we're struggling for existence. But we should know it with certainty from the descriptions of these few verses that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes are also productions of material nature. In other words, it's not subject, It's not Krishna that's forcing people to have bad karma. It's the people themselves that are engaging in bad karma, right? And it's a material thing. It's not a spiritual thing. Right? All transformations in variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. As far as the spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. In other words, you have an eternal soul. It's not subject to the material nature. It's not subject to getting old, sick, and dying. All these things are unnecessary because of false ego and false desires and false activity. As soon as we give up all those false things, these problems go away. And then we make a final solution to it by going back to Godhead. The soul is not in any way changed by the influences of the material nature. So all transformations and variety in respect to the living entities are due to the body. As far as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. They're eternal. Okay, what time is it now?
7:10.
Yeah. See, I don't want to cover too much because this is all deep philosophy. You see? And it's in one chapter. And there's still a lot more verses in this chapter. How many more verses are there? It goes on to 35 verses, and we're on number 21. You see how dense the philosophy is? And they're simple words, but when you start thinking about it, like, this is very profound. And if we understand this, we become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So are there any questions? So every day we're going to do this recapitulation, this summary of what we've studied so far. And then we go another step forward.
Maharaj, either we are talking about material nature, the transformation and the modes of matter are products of material nature.
Yes.
I didn't follow very clearly, Maharaj.
Oh, look your body. How many times has your body changed in your lifetime? How big were you when you were born? Huh?
Very minute.
Yeah, so those are all transformations. But all those transformations are not affecting your soul. It's just the body. You're still Vidyasagar, even though how old are you now? You're 51? 50? Huh?
50 plus, Maharaj.
50 plus, right? But when you were 20 plus, you're still Vidyanath, right? So you see how the only thing that changed is your body, not you. You are you are still the same person in all these different bodies. The body you had when you were 21, the body when you had when you were 12, the body you had when you were 6, the body you had when you were born, the body you have now. The body is transformed tremendously, right? But you have always stayed the same person. You're not a different person today. You can remember when you were younger.
Yes, Maharaj.
You see? So the transformations are only taking place in the body. It's not in the soul.
But if that is the case, what is the real nature of a soul, Maharaj? It's
Eternal. It's eternal. It cannot change.
when we realize the soul, what is how to know our soul is ultimately the same? Because sometimes we get
Are you
confused.
still Vidyanath?
Yes, Maharaj, but my question
Are you
is,
still Vidyasagar?
yes,
Right?
yeah,
I don't say, oh no, you're a Bill Jones now. You don't talk the same, you don't look the same, you're not the same. No, you're always the same person. Your body is changing, your body is not the same, but you're the same person. And you can remember some of the changes.
correct, Maharaj. When we are young also, we can remember the same instances, but how to remember the previous previous janmas? That's where.
Now you're understanding by hearing this philosophy that you did have previous janmas. You've forgotten that. Just like you probably forgot what you ate 3 weeks ago.
Eight. Yeah.
But you did eat.
Yeah,
You
but,
can't say I didn't eat anything 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, but Maharaj, it's not possible to remember the what we are in the previous janmas. It's
Now we're remembering. We're hearing that I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. Jivera Swarupahaya Nitya Krishna Das. That's who I am. I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. I forgot that, and because I forgot that, I'm having all this trouble.
No, my question is, Maharaj, if everybody are forgetting and they try to do the same mistakes, if Krishna would have been given some knowledge about, hey, this you are done in
The knowledge is called Bhagavad Gita. What are you talking
no,
about?
for everyone, Maharaj, see, why, if they know little bit, because nobody knows.
But you can know a lot. Every day we're studying this. Every day we're going deeper and deeper into this knowledge.
Now mainly we want to do a lot of bad things to the things in Maharaj. If they know at least this will have an impact, why they will not know? That is the reason, that is the question, Maharaj.
Why are you worrying about they? Worry about yourself.
Yes.
You're worrying about they. Worry about yourself. Why don't you know? You have a chance to know. You're sitting here. You came here this morning. You come every morning, right? So you have a chance to know. So just worry about that right now. Don't worry about they. You worry about they, you'll never get anything done. You have to do it. You cross the bridge, then you can help other people cross the bridge. You never cross the bridge, you're not going to help anybody else. You're worrying about they. First of all, you worry about you, and you cross the bridge from being a karmi to being a pure devotee. Then you can bring other people across the bridge. Okay?
But Maharaj, I think you explained this in the past. It is because the deep desire is sense gratification.
Yes.
That's why Krishna fulfills by giving them the forgetfulness.
Everything depends on what's going on up here. I mean, on the outside, it might look like you're a pure devotee, but if on the inside, it's you're having a bhangra, continual bhangra dancing with women and beer and wine, and it's not going to work. You have to purify what's inside, right? The thoughts, the desires. So we have to transform our desires from desiring sense gratification to desiring pleasing Krishna.
So we'll be there till all those desires completed, Maharaj?
What?
Completed.
Completed?
Till all the desires are done.
No. We give up. We
have to give up.
We have to give up.
Yeah, you throw them in the trash can.
Yeah.
Just like you throw something into the trash can here, right?
Yeah.
Then the trash can is taken away. You don't see it anymore. So when you throw those desires away into the trash can, you never see them anymore. Then you become a pure devotee, and all the problems go away. Just like people say, "Oh, how do you realize whenever he chooses a date, it becomes sunny?"
Yes, again today is moving.
Look now, it's probably going to rain today. Right? Now, I'm not controlling the sun, right? I'm not Vivaswan. And I don't know why it's sunny or why it's raining, right? All I know is I chant Hare Krishna. That's it. And I just want to serve Krishna and Prabhupada. So that's what we should focus on, serving Krishna, serving Prabhupada and Krishna. Don't worry about anything else. You serve Radha and Krishna, and somehow or other, in a mysterious way, everything will work out. Like, how much did we make yesterday?
Yesterday, overall 101, Maharaj. I sent an email, 101.
In 5 hours.
Yes, Maharaj.
5 hours. How much is that an hour?
Yeah, overall. No, not profit sales. I don't know the profit number. Yeah, the holy sales, holy powder sales. That's around 52K, Maharaj. The holy, the packets, that's 52,000. Mainly consisting of cash is around 19 plus, and the credit card around 6,000, 5,000, 6,520.
Anyway, total is 1.1 million.
Yeah, with all
One point-
food and
$1,100. Right?
yeah, and it's close to 102K, Maharaj. 102.
Okay, so Nanda Mela is usually $180,000 in 2 days,
Yes, Maharaj.
right? So this is amazing.
Yeah, this is the first time only we have made so much. We never crossed 50, I can say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like amazing.
Yes, Maharaj.
One day. And that's what all our devotees eating like anything for free. Every time I looked around, the devotee, oh, I didn't get enough of that. Let me go back and get some more. That's what all our devotees eating like anything. Still, we made. Yeah.
But yesterday, yes, there was a lot of internet problem, Maharaj. Otherwise, we would have got little more. Because a lot of people went back. Some people
No,
not.
not only there was internet problem, a lot of people couldn't get in. They
Oh.
gave up.
Oh, in the parking lot?
They gave up. They just left. After waiting 2 hours trying to get in, they left. We would have had. I'm not exaggerating. We would have had close to 20,000 people if everyone got in.
20,000.
So Maharaj, this is, I was telling you, like, we were continuously scanning the thing. Mango lassi was like obviously it's a $5 one. So imagine we had to get. So it's a $10,481
Just on that.
just on that,
Wow.
and it was at $5. And the chole bhatura, of course, is total is more. It's 11,268, but it's a $10 one. So yeah, we were like non-stop in the mango lassi. Like people were like one group ordered like 18
Wow.
mango lassis.
Because $5 are, because we made $5, right? That's very good. Even the quantity is less. People are buying like anything.
Now see,
Today it was a hard day.
if there was only Vidya Sagar, do you think you could ever do anything like this?
No, Maharaj, no.
You see what happens when you connect to Krishna? Then something that you could never do becomes possible. You have to realize we have to learn by practical experience. We're seeing that we're doing things you could have never done before, right? And then you're doing it because you're connected to Krishna. And it's just by chanting and taking prasadam that you become an exceptional person. It's not because you're studying philosophy. That helps, but even if you don't understand the philosophy, all the deep philosophy that's Krishna conscious, still, simply by chanting nicely your rounds every day and taking prasadam, you can do miraculous things. See? Yes.
So Prabhu was asking about the soul. Soul is eternal.
It doesn't change.
Doesn't change. So the consciousness of a person when they are born and when they are like, let's say you are
That changes
that changes.
because it's material.
But when we, so as like, I mean, I can take you as an example. So you're 77, you have made so much spiritual progress, and that progress should be attached somewhere to the soul. So when the soul leaves the body, that is accounted. So where is that attached? The spiritual progress we make in the life.
Well, the spiritual progress can never be lost because it's based on the soul. Material progress can always be lost because it's based on the body.
So that memory is in the soul, the
Yeah.
spiritual progress we make.
Yeah. Just like your memory, in your memory, you were with your mother when you were born. You just can't remember it right now. But it's possible to remember it. But anyway, you can't deny that you were with your mother when you were born. You see. So you know that's a fact, but you can't remember it because your body changed. So in the same way, we don't remember being with Krishna originally, but we can't deny it because he's the source of everything.
So the soul has memory which has all these informations.
You reactivate the memory by purifying the senses, by keeping them engaged in Krishna's service. And at a certain point you say, yeah, I was with Krishna. I can feel it now that I was originally with God because I'm feeling transcendental bliss now, doing all this service and this is who I am. You see, just like, let's say you were born, and as soon as you were born, somebody kidnapped you. And then you were brought up in a different family. And then one day when you're like 25 years old, you have a sister, and the sister says, you have an older sister, and says, you were not actually born to mommy. You have another mommy. You say, what? How do you know that? He said, well, I was like 6 years old when they brought you into the house, and they said that you have a different mommy. So you didn't know that. You had no way of knowing that, right? Now your older sister tells you you had a different mommy. So now you're going to start looking for who that different mommy is. And if you look hard enough, you'll probably find out who it was that gave you to be adopted right after you were born. That happens a lot. You can look it up on the internet right now. You'll see there's a lot of people in that situation. Right? So now you realize, wait a minute, I'm coming from a different family. That's why, I look a little different than my sisters and brothers. And now you try and search out who was that original mother and father. So that's our situation. We think, oh no, this is my mother, this is my father. But actually, no. Our real mother and father is Krishna and Radharani.
So basically all the information is stored in the soul, but we have access to only some of it.
Yes. Because every time you're born, you forget what happened previously. Because if you don't forget, then you'd be forced to surrender. So that you're not forced to surrender, Krishna gives you that forgetfulness. If you remember your previous lives, you would immediately surrender. You would immediately surrender to Krishna.
Which is good for us, right, Maharaj?
To what?
If we are forced to remember, we will surrender, which is good for the soul.
No, it's not good because it's not voluntary. Right? If you're forced, there's not going to be real love. You have to actually choose it. You see something? Yeah, listen to this now. See, I'm not making anything up. This happens a lot where a child was adopted right after birth and doesn't learn about it until they're 25 or 30 years old.
So the Search Institute found that 72% of adopted adolescents want to know why they were adopted. 65% want to meet their birth parents, and 94% wanted to know which birth parent they most resemble in appearance.
Yeah, you see? It happens a lot. And as soon as they find out, when they're like 20 or 30 or 40 years old, they want to find out, who is my real mother and father? So we have Radha and Krishna. They're our real mother and father, right? So we should find out who they are. That's what we're doing now.
Yeah, Maharaj, I think maybe one clarification for Mataji's question was, so the memory, because we are originally Jivatma, so the Jivatma has everything, including the senses in the spiritual form, including the memory. It's just that when we come to the material world, there is a material representation of that in the subtle form. But there is, because I think how is that the spiritual progress is retained is because the spiritual memory is still there, right? Is that true? That there is a spiritual representation of everything that we see in the material world, there is equivalent in the original, like for example, we have the
If you
senses.
forget something, you lost it. But if someone comes and says, hey, I'm your older brother, I was there when you were brought into the house, and they said that you were born from another mother and father. But I didn't tell you until you were 25. So that's our situation.
So after
We're learning now, by reading Bhagavad Gita, that we're all the sons and daughters of Krishna. We didn't know that before. We're learning it when we're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. Right? Now, is it true? Well, yeah, because there's a difference between the body and the soul. I didn't even learn that there was a difference between body and soul till I was 22 years old. I didn't know the difference between the two. But once I learned the difference, then it becomes possible to understand that my real father is Krishna. My birth father is already dead, right? But his real father is also Krishna. You see, so, but I didn't learn these things when I was born. I didn't have that knowledge from a previous life. I learned it as I got older.
But let's say, Maharaj, after we, attain this pure spiritual nature and go back to Krishna, at that time, do we have this knowledge that we have taken all these lifetimes?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maharaj, one follow-up question. So, Krishna says that, there is no loss in the spiritual progress. And even if you did not achieve the success in this life, you will continue from where you left on the next life, right? So, which means I think what my wife was asking is, where is that attached? Is it attached to the soul? Because we have subtle bodies that also travels with the soul while you are in material world. The mind, intelligence, false ego is...
No, it's the soul.
The
subtle body, mind, intelligence, false ego will carry the material desires.
Right.
But the
spiritual
benefit is with the soul.
With the soul, yeah. I think that's the question she had.
Any more questions?
What qualifies us to get into this Krishna conscious? Like yourself?
Eating prasadam,
Okay.
chanting Hare Krishna, associating with devotees.
No, but for like yourself, Maharaj, till 22
I met
years?
devotees. I
Okay.
ate prasadam, and I started chanting Hare Krishna.
Okay.
I think the Lord gives opportunity. So let's say if we didn't complete the journey this life, the next life He puts us in a situation where we're born in a family who are devotees, or we meet the devotees at early age, and then we continue the journey, right? So that's the orchestration the Lord makes.
At one point in my life, I started praying to God. Although I believed in God, right? Because I was a Christian. I was praying to God, please help me. I'm floundering. I'm not doing well. Please help me. Send somebody or reveal yourself or something. And that's when I met the devotees. And that happens to a lot of people, like the same. You start praying to God, even though you don't know who God is, you still pray to God, please help me. I'm not doing well.
And that prayer inside comes because we made progress in the previous life, right? So that's why we get that desire, please help me. That request comes in the mind because we made progress in the previous life.
Okay, no more questions? All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Bandhu Mohi Savadhana Mate Jahara Prasade Bhai Ye Bhava Turiya Jai
Janara Prasadeva
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hate
12 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Morning Aarti.
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Te Koriya Aikya.
Hello, Mylan. Hey, how you doing? No problem. We're here waiting for you. Thank you.
Arana Kori Ho Mani Asha
Paranako Iyamani Asa.
Sri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Radhi Seyudama Gati.
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asa.
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिला जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिला जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होय दे अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होय दे अविद्या विनाश जाते वेदे गाय जहाँ चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदमा जनारा बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदमा जनारा बंधु लोकनाथ लोके राजीवाना हाँ हाँ प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पाद छाया हाँ हाँ प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पाद छाया
Ye bejas ghusuk tribhuvana Srila Prabhupada Badita Pavana Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschadya Desadarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Tagore Premanandi ki Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararaja ki Jai Astatara Satara Shri Shimari's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vindi ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki Jai Sri Vrindavan Dham ki Jai Sri Maipuri Ram ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ram ki Jai Tulasi Devi ki Jai Bhakti Devi ki Jai Ganga Maya ki Jai Jamuna Maya ki Jai Samveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavani ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Bhakti Smata. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain to pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By his grace,
one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is a perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of the mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki Bhavani ki.